structures. So now what we're going to do is we're going to take a whole brain and we're going to look at some structures on the outside. If I may, ladies, please. Thank you. All right. So let's put these two halves of the brain together. And if we look at these two halves of the brain, right here we see the cerebellum, right there, cerebellum in the back. And over here, I see my two cerebral hemispheres. So here's my cerebellum back in this region over here where my thumb is, this back region. So this right here would be the right cerebral hemisphere, and this would be the left cerebral hemisphere. Then I have this long fissure that goes all the way down this way. That would be the longitudinal fissure. Over here in the back, where the cerebellum is, can you see this fissure? That would be in a transverse plane. So we're going to call this the transverse fissure. I think it might have been switched on the module. I don't know if I fixed it or not, but I'm sorry. But this is the longitudinal fissure right here. And then this one over here is our transverse fissure. Then we have over here on the side, if we come to the side, can you see the sulcus on the lateral side? We're going to call that the lateral sulcus. A fissure is deeper than a sulcus. Okay? Then if I come over here to the middle, we see this sulcus. I'm trying to get it on your screen. Here it is. Can you see a sulcus that goes all the way across? Would it be this one right here?
No.
Would it be this one right here?
Yes.
So this is the central sulcus. Remember that these mounds that we see right here, these are called gyri, or singular gyrus. So if this is the central sulcus, what should we call this gyrus in front? The pre-central gyrus. What should we call this gyrus behind the central sulcus? Post-central sulcus. Do you all remember that when we looked at the module, that we took this little section right here and we mapped out, I'm sorry, actually this region right here and behind, the sensory information? Do you remember that homunculus? That's what that was trying to show. If we take this section right here, we mapped out, you guys are looking at me like that I know is in there. Look again, the post-central sulcus has sensory information, goes to this region right here. And depending on each little spot of the post-central sulcus, it's either where you're sensing information that's coming from your ears, your eyes, and remember that that homunculus tried to show you how great the information, how sensitive it was to that information. So for example, in your ears, the ears were drawn really big because we have a lot of sensory neurons here in the ear that send that information to this region. So take a look, make a note to yourself. I need to look at the post and precentral sulcus. And the precentral was the motor cortex, right? This is where we were sending motor commands. And this one was where we were sending, or where we were receiving sensory information.
That's on 6.2.
When did we do that?
Module 6.2. Module 6.2. Okay. So one more time, can everybody tell me what is the name of this sulcus here? Central sulcus. And what do we call this in front?
Pre-central.
Precentral
Gyrus.
gyrus. And what do we call this?
Post-central.
Post-central gyrus. All right. Then if I turn back here, going back to where our cerebellum is, can everyone see just on this half right here, between the parietal lobe and what's this lobe back here? Occipital. What should I call this sulcus right here between the two? Parietal, occipital sulcus. And what was this sulcus on the side? Lateral sulcus. And what was this sulcus here in the middle?
Central.
Central sulcus between the frontal lobe and parietal lobe. Central sulcus. And what was this gyrus here?
Precentral.
Precentral gyrus, and this one?
Postcentral.
Post-central gyrus, all the way, going all the way down to the sides. And then what do I call this sulcus right here?
Parietal.
Parieto-occipital sulcus. What lobe is this?
Occipital.
Occipital lobe. And what lobe is this?
Parietal.
Parietal lobe. And what lobe is this here in the front?
Frontal.
Frontal lobe. And then we've got our lobes down. And then remember how we identified over here? What lobe is this right here?
Temporal.
Temporal lobe. And this one up here?
Parietal.
Parietal lobe. And if I take this off, what lobe is this right here?
Insula.
Insula lobe. Very good. Now, if I take a section of my cerebrum, like if I take this horizontal section of the brain, can you see this area right here that's a dark beige? What did we call in the module that outer region?
Gray matter.
The cerebral what? Cortex. The cerebral cortex. So that's the only model that we have here that shows the cerebral cortex. So we're good on that page 3. Now let's turn to page 4. In page 4 we have the basal nuclei, and what we can also call the cerebral nuclei and the basal ganglia. Again, not very well envisioned here, so let's instead switch over here to this, and let's look at those nuclei. So if I look over here, whoops, at this region of the brain, right here, can everyone see we're taking what kind of a section here?
Coronal.
I'm ending up with a front and a back. That would be a coronal section. And I look at that, what do I see here in beige?
Cerebral cortex.
Cerebral cortex. And then can you see here in pink, right here, and in purple? These are groups of cell bodies called nuclei. Cerebral nuclei. Basal nuclei. These right here are called, all these together are called basal nuclei. That piece of white matter that's coming across, that's our corpus callosum. Remember how we looked at corpus callosum in this view right here? I see some of you frowning. Here's another view of the corpus callosum. Here. In this case, it's coming out across. Again, this is corpus callosum from a mid-sagittal section, and this is corpus callosum from a coronal section. See how it goes across? What would be this fissure that we see right here?
Lateral.
That would be our longitudinal fissure that we see back there. What would be this fissure right here? No. Transverse fissure. What would be this fissure right here? This would be the parieto-occipital fissure. What was this fissure over here? Transverse fissure, and this one? Parieto-occipital fissure. What's this fissure right here? Parieto-occipital, this one? Transverse. What's this structure right here? Corpus callosum. And what's this right here? Thalamus. And down here? Hypothalamus. And see the 1, 2, the bumps? All of this is
Midbrain.
midbrain. And this?
Cerebellum.
Cerebellum. And this? Pons. And this? Medulla oblongata. And past the medulla oblongata?
Spinal cord.
Spinal cord. And all of this region right here? Cerebrum. And what about just the outer edge? Cerebral cortex. Very good. Very good. Very good. All right. So we've got, I think, all of that. Basal nuclei, corpus callosum. I didn't do the septum pellucidum. The septum pellucidum is just a thin membrane that separates two spaces that we call the lateral ventricles. So if we look over here at our section of the brain, what did we call this right here?
Corpus callosum.
Corpus callosum. And then what do we call this over here? Fornix. Right here is this thin membrane called the septum pellucidum. I could poke through it, and if I poked through it, there's all of this space that goes through it. That space looks like, actually looks like this. This we call the lateral ventricle, this space. We'll do this next time, okay? I can see you guys are fatiguing. And we will, but that membrane that covers up that little space, if I touch and I say identify this structure, that would be the septum pellucidum. If I poke through it, I say what's the space behind it, that would be the lateral ventricles, okay? So that is our septum pellucidum, fornix we covered, and then the internal capsule. The internal capsule is best seen in a section of the brain that is a coronal section, and that would be this V-shaped region right here. So this coming across is corpus callosum. Here are our cerebral nuclei, and then can you see this white matter like this? That kind of V-shaped right there, that's our internal capsule, And as it says there in parentheses, this is just a group of axons that pass to and from the cortex between the cerebral